So first and foremost, I want to talk about how posting on social media has been this mental crux for me. I just kept making excuses for myself to make these videos and try to be a perfectionist and want to make everything right and do everything the way that I have it in my mind. But if you do it like that, you never actually get anything done. I never actually get anything done. So a few things I want to talk about. I got Johnny Bones Jones here. How you doing, Johnny? Yeah, he likes it. Apparently not. All right. This channel, if you're watching now, this is going to be for therapists, massage therapists, physiotherapists, chiropractors, osteopaths, anybody in the physical therapy field, even general practitioners, even naturopaths, anybody that has clients that, you send them off with stretches or you send them off with little mini exercises and they have a hard time following through with them just because of the instruction level, and they didn't really understand what they were doing, and you didn't really have enough time to show them exactly what to do or to actually activate the certain muscles while they were in your office. You can always direct them over to this page, and this is going to be the general hub for that type of thing. So I'm going to label some of these videos a little bit more concisely as we move on, as we get a little bit more specific. But for now, I'm going to just list out some brief introductory so that anybody can watch this, even if you just need a touch up on how things go, or even if clients want to kind of get a general overview of how things are going, about the body anyway. One of the first things I want to talk about, and it's something that I've seen countless people deal with: low back pain, neck pain, feet issues, fascia, what is fascia, and concepts of stretching. So those are the 4 or 5 things I'm going to discuss today with you. We're going to talk about neck pain, okay? Now, neck pain is relatively a general term. When you feel pain in a certain area, let's say you feel pain in your neck, it's not generally a neck issue. It's not usually what's going on with the neck, unless you have whiplash, unless something happened at some point during your life, or if you're constantly looking down and over long periods of time you end up with some degeneration. Age does matter in that. I mean, the older we get, the more frail our bones get, the more the change in the actual dense tissue between the vertebrae actually starts to deteriorate generally, so you end up with a little bit more stiffness and soreness. And I believe, from what I've researched, is that a lot of that has to do with hydration as well. And hydration doesn't always mean what you drink. It's also what you move or what you do not move. Hydration, I love this quote, right? I wish I could write it down and you can keep it in your repertoire, so when you're trying to explain things to people, or even if you're trying to remember on your own: motion is lotion. Motion is lotion. Okay, so the more I move something, the more lubricated it'll actually become. As weird as that sounds, maybe the wording might be a little strange, but the actual joint socket, let's say we're talking about the glenohumeral joint, this right here. Okay, this little ball and socket, right? If I got a ball and socket, and if I move that around, a lot of the time it's kind of jammed in there. And especially if you have posture like this, if you're constantly in this position, that glenohumeral shoulder joint is rotated forward gently, and then this shoulder joint is actually following it, and then you got the scapula coming up like this as well. So then you end up with a whole bunch of muscles kind of rounding forward. Now, if you look at this, see this scapula right here? Hopefully you can see that better. This guy's actually got great posture. I can't even move him, right? But most people are actually tilted forward ever so slightly, which if I could actually bend this, you would actually see what's going on up here. Actually bent this spine would have to bend forward just slightly, and the neck, if I bend forward like this, my neck would have to come forward. I can't walk straight, right? If my shoulders start to round forward, I can't look down when I'm walking. I have to look up. So that act of me looking up creates this density right here, and creates this instability of the neck muscles right here. Okay? That's not hard. We can all follow that. That's pretty basic information. Nothing new there. What I was talking about was actually the actual joint itself, and when that roundness happens, that joint socket ends up conforming to that position, and your body starts to tell that joint that, hey, this is where I want to stay now, this is where I'm going to be. If this person doesn't want me to, if he doesn't want me to, he or she doesn't want me to move up all the way or take my arm through full range of motion, I'm going to help you get to where you want to be. So it stays in that position for you. It develops this scar tissue, it develops these fascial adhesions, and then it allows your body to not have the muscle to do the job anymore. It just, your structures stays that way. So I end up seeing with like thousands of, like over 1,000 clients, I've seen a lot of people that are stuck in this position, almost like their backs, people say they're tight. It's the opposite of tight, in my opinion. It's like, it's this concept that we use in physical therapy terms, it's taut. So if I had an elastic band, for example, this is not an elastic band, but you'll get the idea. This would be a normal length. Let's say this is a normal length. Okay? This is an elastic, pretend, right? Let's pretend this is a muscle. So if I take this muscle and I bring it closer together, and I leave it like that, and then let's say this is your shoulder. Let's say this is the shoulder that goes from here to here, and I bring it together like this. That muscle, if you're staying like this, yes, I'll consider this muscle tightened because, well, it's bringing it closer together. It's tighter, right? Everything's tighter, right? But when you talk about a muscle, let's say somebody is, like we just talked about the neck being this stretched out from here to here. It's supposed to be here, but you're walking around like this. So this muscle would be the opposite of this tight, condensed version. It would actually be so, we call it taut, so because it's pulled to its limit, and then you're putting load on it. Imagine putting load on an elastic that's already fully stretched. That's where we end up with like hamstring pulls and all this kind of thing, because things are already stretched to their limit, and then we're adding load to it in these intense movements. And this is why a lot of, from what I've seen recently, is bodybuilders. I love the concept and I love what it does for people, but when it comes to taking that and putting it on the field or on the court, I have a couple guys recently that just did basic movements, landed off, and the musculature could not hold that anymore. Even though walking around is normal, doing squats is normal, lunges, no pain, no nothing. You can go to work, you're fine. All these basic movements. No pain, no nothing. You go to work, you're fine. All these basic movements, because we train for basic life, try to stay as healthy as possible, but we don't train in these multi-level facets and avenues. So I really want to emphasize the idea that if you're gonna train a certain way, you got to live a certain way, and if you're gonna live a certain way, you got to train a certain way. So if you want to do these sports stuff, you can't expect squats and lunges to get to the root of the issue, and those are very unilateral movements, and they work on just one function of that muscle. So the reason I went off on that is to say, if you don't use it, you lose it. If you don't use it, you lose it. You know, that's another, I just gave you 2 pieces of gold, okay? Motion is lotion, and if you don't use it, you lose it. And that's talking about the joint as well. And I'm talking about range of motion. So if this is new to you, new concepts to you, range of motion, what is range of motion? It's just how much you can take that arm to full ranges of motion. Now there is degrees that you can look up, oh, what's a normal range of motion for my arm if my body's completely still and I take this arm through full flexion, come around all the way around and then back, right? Or wrist. If my wrist only goes to about there, but it's supposed to go, if it only goes to about there, but it's supposed to go to there, I have like at least 40 degrees of decreased range of motion, which is gonna create tightness here, tautness here, and the whole 9 yards. So that is super interesting, and that's what's going on with the shoulder, and I'm gonna explain more of that in a second. So this joint, once you stop using it and it's stuck in this position, there's something inside that joint called synovial fluid. Okay, synovial fluid, it's like the blood of the body. If you consider what blood does to the body, synovial fluid to a joint is almost the same thing. There's nutrients in there. There's just everything that joint needs to kind of stay hydrated. So once it stops moving and it stops taking it through full ranges of motion, it ends up drying up. And the way that I was explained to me one time was, even though I am plant-based, they give you the reference of bacon fat.
So bacon fat.
Bacon fat is actually like when you heat it up, not that I eat it anymore or at all, but once you heat it up, once it's cold, it's rock hard, right? This stuff is like, once there's no hydration, once there's no movement and heat, it dries up completely. Once you actually move that joint around and you keep it hydrated and you heat up that bacon fat, it turns into this jelly-like substance, right? And that's pretty much how the body and why the body ends up with soreness, tightness, because lack of movement. A muscle isn't operating properly, so the body kind of lays down some fascia and tries to help out that area by recruiting it in this fascial line of the body. And I'll explain fascia and fascial lines, and that's a whole other video. I'm gonna have a whole bunch of links and a whole bunch of just concepts and videos that you can watch on your own, or books that I've read. One really good book about fascia, Anatomy Trains by Thomas Myers. I'm not endorsed by anybody yet, but that book really changed my mind about how to approach the body and how to approach musculoskeletal injuries, how physios actually address certain issues in terms of movement, and what kind of information and content that they actually use to learn about that. If you want to see diagrams of how connected the body is, like I'm talking like from the top of the skull to the bottom of the feet, and then there's fascial lines. There's like a superficial back line and a deep front line and a side line. These lines are all cadaver opened, and definitely better for me treatments that I've done based on the concept of fascia. Now, I went off on fascia just a little bit too much. I still wanted to stay on the concept of the joints, so I will continue with fascia after. But let's stay on the concept of joints. But the same thing, it's the same concept. Because once that happens, once this ends up happening, you end up with fascial issues, because fascia is like connective tissue, right? Now when we're stuck like this, that fascia stops the body from just getting out of this position. So you don't have to stay here and hold this anymore. It just stays there for you. So efficient. We actually look at it as a negative thing. When somebody comes to me as a client and I look at that, I actually get really excited. I say, man, that is actually a beautiful way. That's such incredible technology. Like, we have the most incredible technology built into our system, okay? And we'll come in and, oh, this dysfunction, I have dysfunction, oh, my shoulders, my pain. The therapist is like, oh yeah, you got tight traps and you got tight shoulder, tight neck muscles and tight this and overstretch this and you need to stretch that. At the end of the day, the body knows more than we do, like almost every time, if not way more than our conscious mind does. Now, when we're talking about our subconscious mind, we're talking about our superconscious mind. Those are different concepts altogether, and we'll talk about that after. But keep up with me. I promise you we're getting somewhere here. Let me explain a little bit what's happening there, because that'll kind of make a little bit more sense. So if we're talking about neck pain, which is what we originally talked about, and the shoulders are rounded forward, which is about 90% of the people I see, rounded forward. You can see this muscle kind of already, not that I have big traps or anything, but you can see this muscle bulging out already. It should not be bulging out. This shouldn't feel like a rock solid tight ball, right? Even though people go to the gym and they try to work that, shoulder shrugs are not recommended, and I'll explain later. But now look at this. If I actually touch this, this is hard. Now as soon as I set my shoulders into proper positioning and I set them down and everything is actually locked in properly, you can actually feel that, and it's a completely different muscle. It feels normal. It feels loose, it feels ready to go though, but not tightened and shortened and stretched out and up, angry and mad, right? That's a problem. So this happening is a result, this is a result of what's happening here too, right? Now, what is actually the structure that's pulling this shoulder forward, right? Now, when we get massages and we get treatments and we get chiro treatments and we get physio, we always talk about back pain. Now, back pain is a really interesting concept, because it's going along the lines of what we were talking about. So as soon as you round these shoulders forward, those back muscles become taut. If it's here to here, right? And this is like normal posture. If I come over like this, look at that band. It becomes taut. It stretches to its limit. So you end up ribs sometimes pop out of place, and you end up with a rib issue. Then that not only that, but this is stretched out, and we're stretching it out even more with massage and techniques and treatments. We got to really start thinking about why we're even doing that. This is why I'm making these videos, because, you know, therapists, not only just clients, but therapists alone I'm noticing that there's a shift in how we think about why we're doing what we're doing as therapists. So that pull in the back, right, which is also actually more of a pull in the front. So what's happening there is just, it's kind of getting tagged along, right? I know it's getting annoying, I'm sorry. But it's getting tagged along, it's being pulled on over here. So you end up with all this stiffness because of muscle, what? Not shortness, but tautness, which means muscle usually weakness, because it's just oriented in a certain direction.